Welcome to On the Line. I'm Christine Williams. Coming up for discussion on our Viewpoints Hour, deciding who gets a bailout. A hospital being sued for keeping an infant alive, and the battle between Ottawa and Ontario over opening schools before Labor Day. Stay tuned. And these are the issues we're presenting today to our Viewpoints guests for commentary. As the world prepares for the G20 meeting in London, England in a couple of weeks, a sense of confusion still remains on how to fix the world's ailing economy here in Canada. Do we opt for more bailouts? If so, who gets it? A Montreal couple has launched a $3.5 million lawsuit against a hospital for saving their newborn disabled daughter's life by putting her back on life support without their consent. And should we or should we not return our kids to school after summer holidays before Labor Day? That's the dispute between Ottawa and Ontario. Ottawa wanting to stay with the longer break. Now let's meet our Viewpoints guests. Robert Metz is president of the Freedom Party of Ontario. Before that, he was a businessman. And Kamran Niazi is a businessman, more specifically a management and recruitment consultant. And you, the viewer, you are our third guest. Feel free to call in at any time with your comments about any one of the subject matters we're addressing today. And of course, anywhere you look, the topic seems to be about our ailing economy. Take a look at the headline. Now, with this particular story, America's monumental failure of management. That written by Henry Mintzberg from the Globe and Mail. To make a long story short, he's saying that America, and you know, you can apply it to Canada to some degree, but America they seem to be known now for the greed that got them in this mess in the first place. So what he's purporting in this article is we're continuing along the lines of what went wrong in the first place, indulging greed, and it ends up in a vicious cycle. For instance, we keep on hearing stories about stimulus packages and bailouts. But the big question is, how much do you bail out and to who? From what I said earlier, the G20 meeting in London, England is going to take place in about 2 weeks. But the sense that you're getting from reading many articles is that, hey, nobody seems to know what's happening. One thing that the Japanese finance minister said, he believes, along with a lot of other G20 leaders, that we need to be focusing more on bailouts, believe it or not, and stimulus packages, and less on restraint and regulation. Now, the question that we're asking you, the viewer, do you believe that? Do you think we're at an economic time now where things are so bad that we desperately need the government's help? Or do you believe, go for the invisible hand, wait and see what happens, let us learn from our mistakes, and we'll see where it takes us? So let us know how you feel as you hear our guests and I discuss the main issue today, and it's the approach to what we're seeing happening economically. And Kamran, I'm going to start with you on this one. First of all, if you look at this article talking about America's monumental failure of management, would you agree with the premise of this particular article?
It's a very bold article, and I do agree with the premise of the article. Having gone through MBA school myself and having worked with MBAs and recruited MBAs and placed MBAs and lots of other, XXXs in terms of, designations and qualifications, I think to a great extent the article really hits the mark. And the reason for that is that it's talking about the self-centered approach to making sure that long-term holistic benefits are sacrificed for short-term gains. Mm-hmm. Okay, we all come from a culture, especially in the commerce and business world, where you are defined by short-term targets, quarterly targets, semi-annual targets, and annual targets. And you set up a plan, and you work towards that plan by hitting these quarterly targets, and then you get a big fat bonus check at the end of it.
According to this article, our MBA students, unfortunately, that are graduating, they're graduating with the same mentality, looking at the short term, not the long term. Do you agree with that?
Well, I think Peggy Cunningham, who has just accepted the leadership position at the Dalhousie Business School out in Halifax, has also examined this issue, and she's talked about responsible leadership. What have MBA programs been teaching MBA graduates up until now? And how has that got to change with the new world order? Because that's exactly what it is. A philosophical question needs to be asked in terms of what are we actually going out there and teaching our future business leaders?
Does anybody know, though, what the future is holding here? I mean, we don't have a crystal ball, but there's a clear sense as you go from article to article, even when it comes to the United States, okay? They're pretty much fixed when you look at Canada. What you're hearing is we're putting out less than, if you look at our stimulus package, less than the 2% of our GDP in the form of a stimulus, and that's what's recommended by the International Monetary Fund. But if you look over in the United States, you go from one article to the next, you're hearing it's 4.8%, then you're hearing it's 5%, then one other article said it was a whopping 10% of their GDP. So you're getting a distinct feel that nobody knows what's happening out there, even in terms of numbers, far more to even try to project ourselves into the future to understand what this global market is presenting itself with.
I agree. I think it's more important to look at what that money is being spent on and how that money is being targeted as opposed to how large the overall stimulus or bailout check is. Where is that money going? Again, look at it philosophically. Are we just trying to encourage more of the same? Consumption, reckless spending? Or are we trying to greed? Or are we trying to, in fact, change people's mindsets and their perceptions about how to live their lives in a much more holistic, responsible way?
Yes. Robert.
Interesting. I would not say that it's, if you're talking about greed, you're talking about people who want to live at other people's expense.
Yep, that's right. That's right.
Which is a different thing from the message that's being spread here, which seems to be against individualism. And individualism is not greed. Individualism is recognizing that everyone's an individual and that you do not steal from them and you do not live at their expense. Now, when you have so many business failures on such a large scale, that's not a problem of management anymore. It's a problem of government. And the philosophic issue is correct. It's not where the money is being spent, but where's the money coming from? And it's coming out of taxpayers' pockets. And if it weren't for that fact, where the money's being spent is really irrelevant to you and me if it weren't our money, right? So the great danger right now is, personally, I think that the economy has technically, give or take, bottomed out. But the trouble is just beginning. Because
and what's the
now
solution here? Do we go for the bailouts?
Never,
and we need
never,
to look,
never,
okay,
never.
You believe never,
History has shown us it has never worked.
Okay, I'm going to ask you something specific here, something specific about these bailouts. There are two types of bailouts. We're looking, for instance, at the auto industry that's asking for a bailout. Large companies, even the television industry, CBC, given $1 billion a year already from the taxpayers, asking for more. But then there's also the banks. And from what these G20 nations are saying, and the global economists, most of them anyway, they're saying, well, we need to have these toxic assets bought up from these banks. That's the only way to get the economy kick-started again. So when we talk about bailouts, yes, you're against it, but are you also against the bank bailouts, Robert?
Well, absolutely.
All bailouts?
Well, of course, because the government has no magical power to create wealth or kickstart an economy. That's a funny phrase because it sounds like you're kickstarting a battery, okay? Now, if you're kickstarting a battery, the energy has to come from outside the battery. It can't come from inside the battery. But when you kickstart an economy, there is only one economy. So what you're doing is you're kicking some people to start others, and that's the kickstart. And that is what is, it's morally wrong, thou shalt not steal. I don't care whether a Democratic majority approves or not. And that's, you know, the Ten Commandments haven't even begun to be visited yet for introspection, let alone practice. And I think that's a problem with governments worldwide. We have gone from governments that are supposed to institute justice and keep us from robbing each other to governments that don't care less about justice and make sure that Peter gets to rob Paul, or vice versa, Paul gets to rob Peter.
Well, here's the fear, okay, and I'm going to be presenting it to the two of you, but also for you watching. Do you have the fear that Canada and the U.S. perhaps is moving more toward a European-type system of economics? In fact, what some are saying is a socialist-type system of economics. We want to hear your thoughts on that. Let's go now to you, Oriana, on line 4 from Alberta. Hello, Oriana, you're on the line.
Hello, how are you today?
Fine, thank you.
I actually don't have a fear that we're moving towards a socialist system of government or economy. But what I do have a problem with is, for example, with the auto bailouts. You know, the U.S. government and maybe even the Canadian government giving money to the auto industry who are not even making products up to standard. I, for example, went online and looked at Toyota Prius, 44 miles per gallon versus a Chevrolet, which is 17, 22 miles per gallon. So when I go into a bank and I want a business loan, I'm sorry, they're going to ask me, what am I going to do with the money? I have to have a business plan. Here's the government's giving out money and not saying, oh, 10% of your output has to be environmental, or they have to live up to environmental standards.
Anna, I want to thank you for calling in and sharing that view. Keep on listening, okay? Because when it comes to the auto bailouts, it's something that we're going to be discussing here as well. But your comment's fair. Let's go now to you, John, on line 5. Hi, John. You're on the line.
Hi, Christine.
Hi. Go ahead.
Two quick things. But I want you to bear in mind, I've never had a formal education, right? When the stock market was soaring, right, and Madoff was scamming investors and all these people, right? He was preparing false statements for them. Was he doing that to the government, or was the government raking in billions and trillions of dollars? I want to know. They're talking about this regulation and this whole Wall Street system of greedy people and all of that. But I want to know, when all this thing was happening, was the government making money at the same time, or were they losing?
Well, again, I think it comes back to back to Oriana's point.
Yes.
It comes back to management. I truly believe it comes back to management. Here we have examples of companies that have bad management because they've been making bad business decisions in terms of bad products and bad services for the consumer. What has resulted is they're huge loss-making enterprises. The mere fact that they employ hundreds of thousands of people, frankly, is irrelevant. What they've done is actually taken shareholder value and actually completely decimated it.
But why would
and
they
try
do
to
that?
put that? And try to put, because they're making bad products.
But what if the result of their actions is bankruptcy and failure?
I don't disagree with that.
No, I agree. I understand that response,
Yes.
but why would they do that? Like the implication is here, they're doing all that on purpose.
No, they're not. Nobody's saying that. I think what it is basically the companies are making bad decisions, management's making bad decisions, they're making bad products. What they're now looking for is a handout. And that's the real crux of the argument. Should the government be sitting at and actually handing out this money, which, as you quite rightly said, is taxpayers' money, and so somehow they're accountable to us now, okay? Are we going to get that accountability actually acted upon? Who's
John
to say?
actually asked a question, too, that I want to back up a bit, because I do want to get back to the whole auto industry bailout thing, but he was asking the question if the government, if they're the ones making all the money. Well, is that not a sort of a two-part question? Because
governments don't make money, they tax.
Well, exactly, they tax. But the point of the matter is, when you look at the government members, when you look at those representatives in government, they're not going to be starving for cash. Governments do run deficits, if you want to look at it that way, but they're not starving for cash.
Yes. And that's the big danger right now, is that they're going to print cash. That's what the problem we're in today is caused by expansion and contraction of the money supply and easy credit, as they call it.
Exactly.
And so what's everybody calling for as a solution to the easy credit? Hey, we need more easy credit. And that's what you see. You see Stephen Harper saying it. On one hand, he's condemning people like me for saying that, free market's the way to go, and you want to tighten your belt and stuff. And on the other hand, out of the same mouth, he says we've got to loosen up credit.
Hey, the man was
and
facing
interest
off
rates
against the
are
coalition.
lower today than ever. You know.
Right, right.
But there you have it.
Now, for the auto industry bailouts, if you look at it, okay, because our finance minister has been saying the money's not just going to be given away freely. If it ends up being decided, there are going to be strict conditions attached. Do you buy that?
I don't think so. I think that even they can attach as many conditions as they want to. At the end of the day, what you have is a bad product. That nobody wants to buy.
What's the option? Let them fall if they need to?
Absolutely. Mergers, acquisitions, divestitures, whatever it is. I mean, let's bite the bullet now. Let's take the bad...
And see where it takes us.
Let's take the medicine now and see what happens. I mean, this is as bad as time as any, and everybody's suffering. Our banks are in a better situation than most other banks across the world, and that's because of good management. It's because of good oversight. It's because of a risk-taking attitude that was controlled. It wasn't, all loosey-goosey like it was in the U.S. And that has had huge implications in terms of stabilizing our financial sector and stabilizing the ongoing sort of, support of small businesses and of consumers as well. I mean, credit is available. It's probably not as freely available as some would like, but, it's certainly better than the U.S. or the U.K. for that matter.
Okay, and we're going to go for a break, and when we come back, we're going to get straight back to you on the phone lines. Don't go away. again, and welcome back to Viewpoints on the Line, continuing to talk about the economy. And the question that we're asking you, because nobody seems to have a firm grasp on where the world is going and what we should be doing, well, of course, we're focusing on Canada. When it comes to the whole bailout talk, do you think that certain companies like the auto industry, because let's face it, it's a very large industry, if that goes down, a lot of people lose their jobs, and then, of course, that affects the steel companies, and there ends up being a ripple effect. So if you do believe in some type of a bailout, what kind of a bailout do you believe in? Let's go now to you, Linda, on line 6. Hi, Linda. You're on the line.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
I just want to say, first of all, I don't believe this is socialism. Countries like Germany, Russia, and China have condemned the stimulus package. They've called it foolish, and the Chinese ambassador went so far as to blame America for the global crisis we're in. And a German economist was on a show called Foreign Exchange saying it's impossible to spend your way out of debt. And that all three countries are saying that this package will possibly and could possibly lead to a depression, a total collapse, and put us in further turmoil than we're already in. And this German economist also said that a lot of the projects that are included in the stimulus package, for example, building roads and bridges, he said, well, you know, that's not why the American economy collapsed in the first place.
Linda, I'm going to ask you a question, okay, because what you said was well said about the U.S. economy, and that pretty much sums it up. But what about here in Canada? They're looking at anywhere between 5 and 10% of the GDP in terms of a stimulus package, but Canada is still under the International Monetary Fund's 2%. Do you agree with Canada's strategy, and what do you think should be done about the auto industry?
First of all, I don't think we should have a stimulus package like America's. I don't think we can spend our way
like that. And we're nothing like that.
I know, but they were talking about having a stimulus package similar to that, and they're all talking about raising billions of dollars. First of all, we have a deficit ourselves. We do not need a deficit that America has, where they're over they must be over $100 trillion when you add up this stimulus package and some other economic thing they want to sign. When you put it all together, they are way in over their heads. Their great-grandchildren are not going to be able to pay this off. They are slaves to this debt. And Canada, we do not want to be in a situation like that. A stimulus package is not. We don't need anything like that. What we need to do is we need entrepreneurs. We need jobs generated in this country. We need to keep our manufacturing jobs here. That's what we need. And a lot of our manufacturing jobs, unfortunately, have been sent overseas. No wonder our economy is failing. What do people expect when all the jobs are being sent to other countries? Now, that's great for those countries.
Linda, I want to thank you for your call.
Yeah.
You make a lot of sense there. I'd like the two of you to give some feedback on this, because once again, the word socialist has come up quite often concerning the kind of a bailout that the United States is going for. In fact, Alan Keyes came right out and called Barack Obama communist in his approach to the economy, as well as social programs and the giveaways that he's talking about in his budget.
Well, believe it or not,
yes,
there have always been socialists who believed in responsible spending and who believe that you tax as you go. You don't deficit spend. But the thing that distinguishes socialism from capitalism is that under capitalism, each person in the marketplace chooses where they put their money. Under socialism, another guy says, you spend your money there, you got to buy your medicine from here, you got to, you know, it's a completely monopolized
centralized,
completely
yes.
Controlled, and that's why such economies don't work. But there's two issues being confused here. The bailout of the banks, which is a credit situation,
yes,
and the bailout of the automobile industry, which is an entirely different phenomenon, and strangely enough, I think, only happens to be happening coincidentally with the banking crisis to some degree, except for the fact that they need credit. In the car industry, I don't see a shortage of cars out there anywhere. Okay, it's not like the economy needs more cars. That's not where the economic need is right now.
Competition is the problem.
That's exactly the problem. We've produced enough cars. We don't need any more. Cars are so cheap now. They're getting, 0% financing and everything, which has been going on for a long time. You can't make it cheaper. Now we've got lots full of cars that are unsold.
Is it time for us to just give it away to the Asian markets? Let me give you an example.
Don't have to do that either.
If you look at what Chrysler said, they threatened to take their business abroad if they're not bailed out, some $2.3 billion. But here's what they're saying, that the cost of labor is the problem, that for each person working, it costs them at least $20 more per hour than the average worker that works overseas for Honda or Toyota or one of these overseas companies. So how on earth do we ever, and that's the crux here, how do we compete overseas? Or do you just say, you know what, it's a global market, let's learn to?
I think at the end of the day, you've got to accept that every economy, every country, it evolves, okay? And the business practices and the efficiency and the competitiveness of a country and its economy evolves as well. What Canada is going through right now is what the UK went through 20 years ago, with the decline of manufacturing, with the decline of the auto sector actually producing cars in the UK, and those companies were either sold off or they were allowed to go under, and they were bought up. They were bought up. Those cars didn't go away. There were still enough cars on the streets, and those jobs went away short term, but the people, the human resources, the human beings, if you can call them that were responsible for producing those cars, eventually that whole employment sector gave way to the service sector, okay? Now, the argument stands that, you know, maybe that's not as efficient now either, and that there's been a lot of layoffs in that sector as well, but the point I'm making is that as economies evolve, people need to understand that certain sectors will decline and certain sectors will evolve and succeed.
And it's a natural process.
It's a natural process.
Do you have faith in that natural process?
Absolutely. I work in the recruitment industry. I work in the employment sector. I am fully aware of the fact that people can re-engage, they can re-educate, they can learn new skills, they can come out with new competencies and new experiences and new skill sets that will make them more successful in a newer, more changing world.
Okay, now here's the elephant in the room. Economics has always been related to politics. Even before the economy so-called fell, I mean, it was happening over a long period of time, but just before Christmas came the big announcements. But even before that, you were hearing doomsayers, and I'm not saying it in a negative way. Sometimes the doomsayers are correct, but you were hearing warnings about the Asian markets coming up, and you better watch it, North America, because North America is starting to decline. So we're looking at the political issue here, a strong one. Is it possible that if the U.S., let's say, or North America leaves things as they are to the invisible hand, that we'll be giving way to the Asian markets and doing ourselves in politically and economically? In regards to the global, you don't believe that's going to happen? Quite the reverse.
I think we would go completely the other way. People would adapt immediately. You know, I think it's a mistake to say that our car manufacturers are producing bad products. What they're producing is too many, and products that people don't want. It's like in the movie Other People's Money when Danny DeVito tells the shareholders, you know, I'll bet you that last horse and buggy company made the best horse and buggy in the world. And it doesn't matter how good the quality of that horse and buggy was, people were buying cars now. And the world is changing. When I look at the Asian markets, you know what Sony's building and companies like that? Robotics.
Yeah.
They're building robots that look like people.
That's big. Yeah.
And in South Korea, they want household robots that look like people in every home by the year
they're actually
2020.
developing a Bill of Rights for robots.
Absolutely. They have robotic conventions in Europe. And I was reading all this stuff at a time when we're sitting here in North America, and I'm feeling, wow, we're becoming the second and third world. Because the rest of the world is going around us.
U.S. is building too. They're talking about replacing it.
And that's what
the military.
Of course. And the military is one of the legitimate sources of government spending, because that's a legitimate function of government. But taking, you know, Peter's money given it to Paul, that's
you don't believe in that one bit.
Never, because it's always destructive. It can never help anyone to hurt someone to help them. I mean, you don't spread the pain. That's not the right idea, and that's the word you see with all economic stimulus packages. We're going to spread the pain. They actually call it that in the headlines, as though it's something to be proud of, you know. Imagine if you were sick with a deadly illness and you're going around spreading the pain to everybody else. I think you'd be locked away. But economically, we don't think that way for some reason.
Okay, we're going to go now to Mitchell on line 5. Hi, Mitchell. You're on the line.
Good afternoon.
Yes, go ahead, Mitchell.
I'm a victim of the music industry. I got a question for you guys. I've heard over and over in the news that about this recession and the state of the recession we're in now, right? But 12 years ago, when the government was asked to regulate the internet, right, which caused this disaster in the first place, it's like, what's the big deal now? Why bail out everybody else? So that's my question. Where is the music manufacturing businesses, and where is the people that used to work in those businesses?
Okay, Mitchell, thanks for calling in and expressing your viewpoint. Let's go now to Andy on line 4. Hi, Andy. You're on the line.
Yeah, hi, Christine, and I'm sorry that I missed your call yesterday. There was a technical glitch. Anyways, I got a very succinct comment, okay? There are big fishes in the sea, and there are small fishes in the sea. The economics, recession, or whatever it is, okay, that throws down the first net, all right? So some fishes are going to be trapped. But if the government turns around and does big bailouts and all that and the other, all they're doing is throwing smaller and smaller nets into the sea, and then there will be no fish. That, in summation, is my layman understanding of it.
Not at all, Andy. Thanks for calling in and sharing that. Let's go now to Eliane on line 6. Hello, you're on the line.
Good afternoon.
Afternoon.
I just have a question. I hear about these bailout packages and all of that to fix the economy.
Go ahead.
My question is, does bailing out these companies generate revenue for the government? Whereas with people working, I know for a fact it generates revenue. So I'd just like someone to answer that question.
Yes. Go ahead.
Well, in the short term, no, but the hope is that when they bail out these companies, that in the long term, they will become taxpayers. That's the risk that they feel that they're taking, and that's not the kind of, quote, risk that a government should be taking with anybody's money. And the problem is, when the government is also being so indecisive and seemingly not knowing what it's doing and not sure of what it's doing, what that does is in turn spread a message throughout the whole marketplace of this uncertainty, and investors are reluctant to take the action necessary to start correcting the economy. And the one thing an economy needs, when people say our jobs are going overseas, it's not a job that's going, it's capital. It's the money that creates the jobs. It's the machinery that creates the jobs. And that's one of the things Canada has going for it. Even if the companies pull out, those factories that are already stuck in the ground aren't going anywhere. So the capital's there. Someone can take them over. We see this happening not only in the auto industry, the television radio industry, tremendously.
Yeah, because
you've seen
already
with CTV
with
and CBC,
right.
and so the whole world is changing, and the economy is moving up to another level. As you were saying, it's an evolution. And we can't stop it. If you try to stop it,
okay, something
you're
to
going to go
consider.
backwards. You're not going to stay the same. That's the thing.
We're going to come back and briefly talk about it because we need to move on to our other subject matters. But some food for thought here that I'm going to be asking you when we get back. We did a prior program dealing with the whole economic issue, where the world is going. Leonard Brody, he's the CEO of Now Public. He's raised millions of dollars and startups for many businesses. We had David Kravitz on, who has actually raised billions of dollars in advertising. And then there was another major company that was on too, a CEO of that company. But the thing is, I posed a question to Leonard that when it comes to buying Canadian and trying to support our country economically, is it going to help? Because we had call-ins inquire about that maybe we need to buy Canadian to help us out more. What his answer was may disturb some people, but I sense that this could be the reality we're facing. And both of you are businessmen here, so I want to know what you're going to think. I'll save it for after the break, but this was his answer. That to ask somebody or to focus so much on the Canadian and buying Canadian economy is like telling a person, don't take a holiday overseas anymore. Just stay in Canada and do your shopping, because the fact is we live in a global market and there's no turning back the clock. The chips are going to fall one day, where they will, but as David Kravitz pointed out, perhaps it's time for us to start thinking, how in Canada can we be more competitive? So I'm going to be asking the two of you that question. And of course, we're going to get back to you on the phone lines. Don't go away. We'll be back. Again, and welcome back to Viewpoints on the Line, continuing to talk about our first subject matter and asking the question, how do you feel when it comes to our government approach to the economy? Do you believe in bailouts? Let's go now to you, Ty, on line 4, calling from Alberta. Hi, Ty, you're on the line.
Hey, I actually just wanted to comment on the auto industry bailout in the States, and to say that mainly GM, the American government really can't afford to lose them, because they're a supplier of most of their military vehicles, and with the amount of time that it takes to develop, test, and mass produce vehicles that are going to be deployed, they really can't afford to lose GM at this point any more than they can afford to lose, like, Lockheed Martin.
Ty, thanks for calling in. Any feedback on this, Robert?
Whether GM goes bankrupt or is bailed out, it's not going anywhere. They're not going to lose it. The question is, will GM be better off after restructuring through a bankruptcy procedure, or will it be better off under a bailout? The bailout is doing nothing because it cannot produce new production. All the bailout can do is catch up with old debt. And I'm thinking, why are we even going there? We made that big mistake. We're going to pour billions into catching up with that. And then they threaten the companies with, you've got to be viable in 3 months or else. Holy cow, it's better to start off at ground zero.
It was Ty, right?
Yes.
Ty raises an interesting subject, actually. I mean, he's talking about GM being more than just a car company, it being a strategic asset that the U.S. needs to protect. And I think that's an interesting perspective, because you need to look at how many of these strategic assets there are in an economy, and you need to then decide, is it in the government's interest to indeed keep these things afloat, or is it in the consumer's interest? And if it's not in the consumer's interest, absolutely, let the consumer part of their business fail, and let the government take care of what it needs to take care of in order to protect their strategic asset. So I think that's worth commenting. Yeah.
Yes. Let's go now to Robert on line 5. Hi, Robert. You're on the line.
Hello.
Hi. Go ahead, Robert.
Yeah, I was just watching on TV then about Robert commenting on Sony building robots and all that kind of stuff. To me, I believe in technology, but I think technology is one of the biggest problems too, because if we allow robots to come into our homes, I mean, that's just putting more people out of work also, as far as I'm concerned. I mean, there's better spot. I mean, I'm unemployed right now. I can't get unemployment insurance. I don't believe in auto bailout either. But that's the biggest problem there. I mean, people are buying all these fancy TVs, put it on their credit card and all this kind of stuff. Technology. I mean,
You bring up a good point. Thanks, Robert, for calling in. You bring up a good point, putting more people out of work. I mean, even with computers,
show me where that ever happened.
It's progressing.
Where has that ever happened?
But Robert's making a good point as well. He's talking about human resources, and he's talking about the human piece of human resources.
Right.
Okay, and that's what Mintzberg talked about in his article
we hardly see
a
teller in a bank anymore.
Exactly.
If you look at it that way.
Exactly. But we still don't see. Bank branches did once close, but now they're reopening, because the human element in every customer, client, or every sort of service provider, client, customer interaction is becoming more and more relevant. And that's, I think, an area where the Western economies, in terms of their approach, in terms of looking at responsible leadership, looking at commercial enterprises that look at the entire spectrum of what you're actually providing and how you're providing it and who you're providing it to, can lead the way. The robots are fine, but you're leading to an insular society that's got a whole bunch of other issues as well.
But what Robert says, I'm going to have to move on because of time, but what Robert is saying really ties into the question I was asking the two of you before the break. And that is, in the face of so-called progress, a lot of changes happen. It can be quite frightening. Many are saying, buy Canadian to help our economy. The other side is, hey, instead of thinking buy Canadian, how about Canada become more competitive in the global market? You agree with that approach?
I mean, we have to accept the reality that we live in a global marketplace. The freedom of labor and the freedom of people and minds and ideas is pretty much unrestricted now, give or take a couple of protectionist regimes here and there. But talking about goods and talking about items of manufactured substance that either can or cannot be in Canada, we don't know how to verify that. I mean, I think I was mentioning earlier on, I was reading an article. Toyota makes cars in Canada. Toyota sells cars in Canada. Just because I buy a Toyota, does that mean I'm not buying Canadian? Where do you draw the line?
Where do you draw that line?
GM and Chrysler.
Some people would say not, because it depends where the capital comes from. So you can get in all sorts of...
But it's employing Canadians.
But I agree with what you're saying.
Canadians are getting utility from it, and it's keeping, Canadian jobs in Canada.
Peter on line 4. Hi, Peter. You're on the line.
Thanks for taking my call. I'd just like to make a comment that the auto industry should not receive a bailout, for the simple fact, ultimately what you're doing is paying the mortgage payments for the employees of the auto industry that do not want to give any concessions. And to me, that's highly unfair. Compare that to a mom-and-pop's corner store where a couple of people lose their jobs, and they do also have a mortgage to pay. Who's going to come and bail out the little person?
Thanks for calling in, Peter. I'm seeing a nod here.
Well, again, that's why the government is always interested in majorities and large numbers, because that's where they'll put their efforts. But theoretically, this Buy Canadian thing, imagine if I had a choice of buying this cup from a Canadian-made or American-made, and say, or foreign-made. Say the foreign-made one costs $1, the Canadian-made one costs $2. Now, someone might argue I should buy the $2 cup instead of the $1 cup, but what does that do to my economy? I have $1 less to spend on another Canadian who might be producing another Canadian product or any product. And all I've done is given a single producer twice as much money that he should not get otherwise because he's competing with someone else.
Yes.
So it doesn't make any sense. And if you think that we should buy Canadian, well, why not? Why shouldn't we buy Ontario? And why shouldn't Torontonians buy Toronto only and not go to London? Why shouldn't Londoners
support
just...
the city.
Exactly. And you hear people that talk like that until you get down to the point where, why don't you just stay in your backyard, grow your own grapes in the back, don't trade with anybody.
It does take us back to the early days,
to say nothing,
before industrialization.
To say nothing of the people on the other side of the border who are our major market, you know. We don't want to cut them off.
So what do we say? Support Canadians when you can.
I think let's be realistic
support a free
here.
economy.
Support a free economy. What about you, Kamran?
Let's be realistic and let's take all the arguments and understand them in their whole entirety first before sending out you know, signals like that.
Now I'm going to be going on to the next subject matter, but there's another article I couldn't let go by. It was written by Lauren Gunter. We've had him here, actually from our station out west, join us for On the Line for Viewpoints. And he wrote this article called Tear It All Down. He was going back and forth, and I'm talking pretty passionately about bailing out CBC. He doesn't believe that we should be bailing out CBC. We're already doing it, in his view, with the $1 billion in taxpayers' money every year. Why do they need any more? Plus, as he put it, it tends to only give out one viewpoint to the left. And this is according to Lauren Gunter here. But there's something else that he said here. Quote, if the proselytizing on CTS and Al Jazeera TV can survive without public treasury, why shouldn't the CBC have to do the same? I don't know if to take offense by that statement or not. Hey.
I think
you were complimented.
I think
so.
I think Al Jazeera was accepted as a part of the mainstream media there as well. So
and he did write an article about On the Line before,
exactly.
okay? I got to credit him for that. When he joined us that day, we were covering the whole coalition issue and the budget that came down, and he was surprised, like all of us that were here, that the majority of callers that called in fact, I'll go so far as to say 95% of the callers, everybody wanted to know about those rebates for doing their home renovation.
Homes,
So he commented that it was like watching the Home and Garden channel. So we'll leave that there.
Just leave it there.